I picked up Marvel's Voices pretty much because it looked like a mess, but I hadn't gotten around to reading it. Then I saw your boy Zach's video about it and stopped watching it so I wouldn't spoil the cringe. It's best when it's fresh. But someone posted a page of the comic on Twitter, so I just had to read this thing because oh my god, is this a mess. Allow me to explain. This anthology is a result of a podcast I've never heard of called Marvel's Voices. Where, according to the intro essay, Marvel's tokens assemble to talk about diversity and their artistic journeys and probably share shitty cookie recipes. This is apparently the brainchild of Angelique Roche and Chris Robinson. The brilliant idea behind this 40-page anthology is to have 14 stories about random characters and 7 essays about race because that's totally why you read Marvel Comics. Lecture me, O Melanin One. What that means practically is that most of the stories are a single page, 1 page long. That's not even enough time for a thought, let alone a scene, let alone a story justifying an anthology. So let's just get this out the way. The essays are pointless. They're exactly what you would expect to see in a book like this. Just find a book of essays about race edited by Michael Eric Dyson or Ta-Nehisi Coates. Same shit. As for the stories, let's hear from Robinson. He says, quote, "How exactly do you adapt a podcast into a comic book anthology? You don't. Unless you're actually describing a story in the podcast, there's nothing to adapt. You have to have a narrative, an actual point, a beginning and middle and end. Otherwise, you're just making pinup art." And then he says, so the challenge became not just how a podcast becomes a comic book, but how a comic book can represent the multifaceted communities and background that make up Marvel, on the page and behind it. How? Yes, how? However do you do this? If only there had been a very business-savvy Jewish ladies' man who did this 70 years ago, and had a hand in creating most of the popular Marvel characters. Somehow Stan Lee could figure this out for decades, but you, having his complete body of work at your disposal, just can't work it out. And then, as if to prove how ineffectual he is, Robinson says, "Oh, and don't forget, do all of that without blowing up my budget and or the schedule." What, are you paying for this out of pocket? Not on the Marvel salary. All of these characters are owned by Marvel. The book will be printed by Marvel. Everyone's contract is with Marvel. You ain't paying for shit. Marvel is paying for this. And for such an important project, the book people are just clamoring for. Shh, listen, shh. You can hear them clamoring. So much clamoring. I'm sure Marvel will be able to cough up the cash. But is that your excuse for the questionable quality of this book? I mean, most of the art is okay. Some of it is good. Sanford Green's Wolverine art is absolutely fantastic, but the stories themselves are forgettable. And that's because you got a bunch of okay writers and you only gave most of them 1 page. That's not really enough time to showcase anyone's ability to tell a story, at least for the writers. The artists can show that they're talented, even though they won't really have any time to showcase their skills, but writers really can't do anything in a page, except for make an ass of themselves. Like I said, all of the stories are forgettable, except for one, and for the wrong reasons. Enter She-Hulk in Punishment. This is written by the illustrious Roxane Gay, a radical obese lesbian feminist, I know all of those are oxymorons, whose Black Panther spinoff was so popular it got cancelled. The art is by who gives a fuck because it really doesn't matter. It could have been done by anyone so long as it got the job done. And what was the job? A feminist revenge fantasy on a rapist. What is it with feminists and their violent fantasies? And again, always against men and always to the most ridiculous extreme with little to no context. So here's the story. Attorney Jennifer Walters, aka She-Hulk, is representing a woman who was assaulted by some man. Wait, let me fix that. A black woman who was assaulted by a white man who only gets 18 months for an unspecified crime. Keep that part in mind. Jen goes home but can't sleep because, quote, "It's not winning when a man only gets 18 months for assaulting a woman who has worked for him for 3 years cleaning up his messes." So Jen gets up, somehow sees She-Hulk in the mirror, and they concoct a plan. The next morning, as the convict is heading to jail, She-Hulk gut punches the van, races to the back of the van, ignoring the cop she's just killed to grab the guy and say, quote, "Your victim wants a few words alone with you before you get to prison. She's the one you should be afraid of." Oh my fucking god, this is precisely why people don't like feminists, because if they could do shit like this, they would. So for context, Roxane Gay says that she was a victim of sexual abuse, specifically raped as a child by a group of boys. So in a way, this is her basically playing out a revenge fantasy. I detest revenge fantasies. I understand the temptation to write them. I know it can feel cathartic, but I also know they usually lack any nuance, any explanation, any realism, and any substance. I'm speaking about things I've been through, things I've seen, things I've heard from my friends. I understand the impulse, but ultimately, it's just mental masturbation. And in this case, it's doubly worse because Jen is supposed to be a good guy and a lawyer. When you have a superhero do something like this, they are no longer a hero. She-Hulk would not do this. The Punisher would. That's the character you should have used, but then he's a man, so what would he know about rape except for being a rapist? And you think I'm joking, but I'm not. That's actually Roxane Gay's opinion. She doesn't care about male victims, doesn't even really acknowledge them. For example, in her book Not That Bad, Dispatches from Rape Culture, she had 29 stories from rape victims. 2 were male. 2. 2 out of 29. You couldn't find more than 2 men in the United States who were rape victims. Bullshit. You either didn't look or you didn't care. And of course, all of the perpetrators were male because why include victims of female rapists? That's just so you understand where this story came from. This is a person who openly expresses hatred of men, white people, and cops, and has a very particular focus on a specific issue. So let's just go through this. First, we're told the guy gets 18 months, and it's heavily implied that he's committed some kind of sexual assault, and we're supposed to think 18 months is an unreasonable sentence. Maybe it is. Unfortunately, we don't know his crime. What was he convicted of? You don't have to give us long-winded details, and if you're trying to keep it rated G, this probably isn't the best topic to use, but what did he do? That's what I want to know. Incidentally, if this were a woman who had assaulted a boy or a man, she would have gotten 18 months probation and wouldn't even have to register as a sex offender. That's not a joke, that's a fact. Women who rape children get less time than children who rape children. Never to Roxane Gay's complaint. I can't find a single example of Roxane Gay having a problem with female rapists getting a slap on the wrist, which happens way more often than men getting away with it. If you have any examples of her actually taking issue with it, without it being breaking news or something trending on social media, show it to me. So then Jen makes an ominous statement that this is about to change, which means what she does next is premeditated. That's a felony. She goes home and can't sleep because apparently she's pondering all the ways she can get revenge on this guy who just got sentenced in what was presumably a fair trial. She says to this guy who's in bed with her, and I'm not sure who he's supposed to be, that quote, "It's not winning when a man only gets 18 months for assaulting a woman who has worked for him for 3 years cleaning up his messes." No one talks like that. This is why it's so important to read your dialogue out loud. But also, how is it not winning? You don't get sentenced to a time that's equivalent to the time it took to commit the crime. If you did that, very few people would ever go to jail. So how is it not winning? You know, it would help if we actually knew what he did, but that's never discussed. Even this statement about a woman cleaning up his messes is so vague that it's not clear what he or she did. What were they doing? So basically, you want us to think that 18 months is unfair without telling us why. Then Jen waits until the next morning and attacks the police van taking this man to jail. Now, a couple of points. 1, he's going to jail. Look at him. We all know what's going to happen to him. Whatever he did to this woman is probably going to be done to him several times in the next 18 months. That should be sufficient punishment, even for someone like Roxane Gay, who doesn't seem to think male rape is even a thing. That's not how justice is supposed to work. If you're arguing this is a horrible, life-altering act, you don't inflict that on another person. However, since this is a feminist revenge fantasy, this should really be good enough. He will get tortured and raped in prison. You should be happy. 2, this means that Jennifer Walters, a lawyer, found out the schedule for this van, camped out with the intent of circumventing the law, and brought her client with her. Keep in mind, people know she's She-Hulk. They know who she is. So you now have the lawyer who represented the plaintiff attacking the defendant after the trial and helping her client do the same thing. First off, your ass is disbarred. You're done. Forever. No more law for you. Second, both of you will go to jail, likely for more time than this guy. Third, this shit might get his case overturned. If his lawyer can show that you had any bad faith in representing your client, especially if that affected the client's testimony, he could be released. Smooth move, Jen. 3. In order to stop the van, Jen doesn't stand in the middle of the road. She doesn't grab the van and slow it down. No, she punches the shit out of it as it's speeding along. She hits it hard enough to cause the back doors to fly open. Anyone in the driver's seat is dead. Instantly. You killed anyone in the front of this car, and probably the dude in the back. And we see that she did kill the driver because there's his body. And does she help him? No. That would be what a superhero would do. This is a feminist revenge fantasy, so she's like, fuck that cop who I killed just for doing his job, even though he probably doesn't like the schmuck in the backseat either. Holy fuck, you're murdering cops? You're murdering cops just to get one man. Just so we understand, it's okay to kill someone, a random person, a cop just doing his job, so you can get revenge on one assailant. I mean, look at this guy. He's hanging out of the broken window. You're not calling an ambulance, you're not checking on him. And all to get this one dude, because it's not like you don't know teleporters or telepaths or sorcerers who could just whisk this guy away unnoticed. Nah, you gotta kill motherfuckers to get him. Which brings us to 4. The woman is there. So apparently Jen brought her along or told her where to be, so now she's an accomplice to this crime. And then Jen says to the guy who's reasonably shitting himself, your victim wants a few words alone with you before you get to prison. She's the one you should be afraid of. So I will remind you, this is Roxane Gay's revenge fantasy. Her attackers were children themselves. In all probability, they were rape victims as well. More likely than not by women, since those are the people who usually have access to children in the black community. So if we were to play this out to its logical conclusion, Roxane Gay is implying she's fantasizing about torturing and or raping boys. Cause that's really what's being implied in this panel, that this woman is going to physically and or sexually assault this guy to get revenge on him before he gets to prison, where he will likely be physically and sexually assaulted by other inmates. And Jen is smiling, like this is justice, while this woman is thinking of all the different ways she can Theon Greyjoy his ass. Honey, those are felonies. You're going to go to jail, again, probably longer than this guy will because of how premeditated the act is. So you've gone from innocent victim to violent sadistic abuser, and you're using your assault, presumably rape, to justify it. This isn't a Marvel comic, presented as if it were a heroic thing to torture a man because he didn't get the sentence you wanted. And keep in mind, we don't know what he did, we don't know what he was charged with or convicted of, and we don't even know this woman is telling the truth. We're just presented with a listen and believe and we're going to murder this man afterwards story. Marvel Comics, 2020.